Hey everyone, and welcome to our IDN student-led webinar. Tonight we are really excited to have a former student, Marni Levett, present on storytelling. Marni works for Arcadis, and she is a graduate of the Instructional Design program in the class of 2021. So we're really excited that she's come back this evening to talk about the power of using storytelling to spark learning. So I will turn things over to Marni.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. This is something that I love. I love, love, love talking about. I'm just going to jump right in. And I want to make this very interactive. So if you are comfortable, you can stay off mute if there's no background noises, or if you choose, just reply in the chat. Let me just make sure that this little thing is out of my way here. So let's just start by asking really quickly, in general, what makes a good story? Think about the last movie or the show that you watched that you really liked, that you told everybody about. What made it good? And you can just drop things into the chat or into the, or just go ahead and just shout it out. And actually, I'm just going to see if I can get to the chat as well while we're doing this. Pull this back over here. Okay, good. I see well-developed characters. I see plot, relatable characters. What else? What makes a good story? Think about the last thing you binge watched. Maybe it was, well, I don't know if reality TV has has any, well, maybe it does. Tension, yes. The villain and the hero. Perfect. Perfect. So I checked with my colleague ChatGPT to see what he thought. And here's what he came up with. And a lot of this is similar. Compelling and relatable characters. And yes, I call him a he because, he's my colleague. Compelling and relatable characters, a strong conflict or tension, as was mentioned, emotional engagement, structure, meaning a clear beginning, middle, and end, authentic voice, which I thought was interesting, good pacing and timing. If something takes too long, you're going to get bored. And then the last thing it mentioned was a resolution that provides closure. So let's dive into this just a little bit more and ask the question again, what makes a good story for learning? Is there anything that you can think of that would be different from the list on the previous slide? You can drop your thoughts in the chat or just shout it out again, whatever works for you. Can you think of anything else? Oh, there we go. Making connections to the story from the story to application. Good. It needs to be tied to objectives. Good. Character growth or change. Perfect. Any other ideas? So now we're bringing the whole idea of learning into this, and you'll find that ChatGPT actually gave me a lot of the same things, but then a few others. So again, we have the compelling characters, we've got the strong conflict, the emotional engagement, well-paced and structured, but there were actually 4 things that ChatGPT specifically listed that weren't in the first list. Show, don't tell, clear learning objectives, realistic content, and then a reflection and a takeaway. So how do we get there? It sounds good, but how do you put all of that together? So a little bit of background, I'm an instructional designer for a global consulting firm with engineers, scientists, architects, all very, very smart people who are also very busy. The specific audience for the learning resources that I create are our account leaders, business development, and salespeople. But I occasionally assist with training development for all 36,000 of us worldwide as well. So as you can imagine, these people are very busy. And training, and this is, I think, true all across the board, training is never at the top of their list. Training is typically a check the box activity when something is assigned to them. So I know that this is a rhetorical question, but how much learning typically takes place when someone is just checking a box? Any ideas? Okay, again, I said that was rhetorical. None. Exactly. Nothing, there's no learning that takes place. In my company, mandatory training, and actually this is probably the same from all companies, mandatory training is our key to doing business. Employees have to take the training to be compliant with corporate and legal bylaws and policies. So what if that training happens to be annual mandatory training that is also a check the box activity? I mean, we're getting it done, right? So we're checking the box, but did anybody learn anything? Again, rhetorical. We know the answer to this is none. Nothing happened. So let's talk about instructional story design. And so I'm going to introduce you to this and take you through my story of how I developed a story for learning. Many of you might already know this book. And you might have already heard of Rance Green as well. He is the author. I picked up this book in early 2022 after I watched a webinar that featured Rance and his methods for using a story in learning. And I was totally intrigued right away. Rance is a true storyteller, and he's the kind that you just hang on every word. So I thought there might be something that I could learn from him. So Rance offers, and this is not an infomercial, but I am going to plug it because I thought it was a fantastic experience. Rance offers workshops through his School of Story Design and beyond, and an amazing certification program in instructional story design that I completed last September. Going through that program completely changed the way that I look at everything. And you can believe me when I say that there's a story in everything, even boring mandatory training. And I'll give you a link to the website at the end, but my sales pitch for his program is that it's worth every penny and really builds on what you're learning already here at Quinnipiac or what you already learned in such a unique and valuable way. So story design is not just sitting down and writing once upon a time and then miraculously a story flows on the screen. Like the instructional design process, there's a model that leads you to the point where the story starts to take shape. So let's quickly compare the standard ADDIE model to instructional story design. We know there are other models as well, but we're going to use this one. It's here on the screen, which of course ADDIE stands for Analyze, Design, Develop, Implement, and Evaluate. Story design is quite similar. The first step of story design is discover. Okay, so maybe that's the same word for meaning the same thing, but this is closely related to analyze, where we're learning about who our stakeholders are, what the problem is that they're trying to solve, what they hope the business outcome will be if they solve that problem, and what they think the best solution is. And sometimes what they think the solution is not necessarily the best solution in the end after we've looked at it. When you have this information, you can write your training target, which is almost like the mission statement of the training. And it sounds something like this. The training target for this project is to eliminate the root problem, and that's the problem we identified, to achieve the business outcome by implementing the training solution. So this is kind of just something to focus on. It's almost like my objective for completing the training. I want to make sure that I solve this problem, achieve their business outcome, and do that through the training. So once this training target is clearly defined, we can start to design, which you can see there's no difference there. We'll design the story, which at first isn't a story at all, but I'll get to that in just a minute. Then we deliver, which includes developing and implementing. And of course, there's always evaluation at the end for both improvement and results. Sharing information should never be the goal of training. While it's important to introduce and share new information, if that's all you're doing, that can be done in a memo or an email. The ultimate goal for training is for learners to internalize and take action on what they learn and change their behavior if necessary. Otherwise, we're going back to checking that box. So how do we go from telling a story to action? This brings us back to our relatable characters, which we talked about earlier, and our strong conflict. And when we add those together, it naturally creates a desire for resolution. So when you have those two things, all of a sudden emotionally, we're connected to the story and we want something to be fixed or solved or something like that. And when your learners have the desire to solve that problem, they're ready for, ta-da, instruction. This is where we teach them now at this point, and then that leads to action and real change. So let me share my story about my story. Once upon a time, okay, just kidding, we're not going to go there. One of the requirements of the instructional design certification is that a final project that shows you've learned or showed that I learned what I needed to learn. And so for my project, I took one concept from our annual privacy mandatory training and applied the story design ideas. Now, if you've ever taken any mandatory training, you know how dry it is. So this was definitely a fun challenge. So first, let me just share a high-level overview of the structure of the module that I created and how I fit the story into there. It's a strictly corporate-looking module. There's nothing fancy about it, but I was able to put the story in there. So let me share the overview of it quickly, and then we're going to jump into the into storyline, and I'll show you what it was that I built. The topic that I chose was handling client data properly when you're faced with a decision to share that information from a project. Really exciting, right? So we work with a lot of different clients around the world, and the data that we collect for those projects, a lot of it is most likely private data, or probably shouldn't be shared. So the basic structure of what I did, and this is only one concept from privacy training, but I wanted to expand on this. So the basic layout or structure of the module is that I do share information at the beginning, because you can't get away with not doing that, but it's what you do after that that makes it actually more effective. So I share definitions and information about protecting client data. Then I introduce the story with solve and reflect questions, share a little bit more about our corporate privacy principles. So you can kind of see I'm intertwining the solve and reflect and the story with the information. I continue with the solve and reflect questions, and then I conclude the training. So let's go to storyline so I can walk you through the slides, and I'm going to play some of it and stop and come back, and then we'll come back. I'm going to go back and forth a little bit. So let me just open up storyline here. Okay, this is very corporate looking. Nothing fancy about it, but this is our privacy training, and we're just going to be focusing on client data protection. So this is the opening screen, and this is just the description of the course. Because I used this as part of the certification, I did link to the School of Story Design, and you'll notice that I didn't really list learning outcomes or learning objectives. I'm just telling them what we're going to do, instead of listing those objectives, making sure that the objectives come later. The first slide that actually shares information, ignore all this stuff around here. Now this is fully narrated, but the first slide just talks about what personal data is for about 30 seconds, and then it asks them to click through, and I'll just kind of click through these layers so you can see it. It asks them to click through and learn about the different types of personal data. So this is the first one. This is about employee information, digital details, IP addresses, all of this, client information. So this is client information, are the names, phone numbers, and email addresses of our clients' employees. That's personal data, as well as any data collected on behalf of a client during the project. So that's how we define it. And then we've got contractor, subcontractor, here's 5 photos and videos, and then highly sensitive data. So the learner would come in here, and this is kind of a click to reveal thing, nothing too exciting about it yet. This is your standard corporate looking module. And then what we do is we go to this, where we break out client data a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is show you how I start with the client data definition and talk a little bit more about it for about a minute. And then we're going to jump into the story and end with the first question. So I am going to start, let's preview these selected slides. And please, when I start playing this, please give me a thumbs up that you can hear.
The names, phone numbers, and email addresses of our clients' employees are personal data that we need to protect. We also need to protect data collected on behalf of our client during a project. Examples of this might include conducting a residential survey as part of the project, managing a toll road or tunnel on behalf of our client, or monitoring a video surveillance camera at the project site. Let's join Mark and Ingrid as they respond to a client request.
Okay, so I've just introduced a little bit of the story. We know we have 2 characters named Mark and Ingrid. Here's the story.
Ingrid, it's been a while since you've been in the office.
Huh. Once in a while, they let me leave the project site. I just got an email from Bridge Builders Incorporated, and they want some footage from the surveillance cameras from the new bridge project. They just need a 30-second clip.
Sure. What's it for?
They have a presentation at City Hall, and they want to put it on their website with their next project update.
Okay. Let's see. We have a few different camera views. Which one do you think would work?
What about that one? So you can see the traffic.
Yeah, you can see a lot of detail, even license plates. I wonder if that's too much
I
detail.
think it's perfect. Let's use that one.
Okay, I'll send it right over.
So now we get to the first question. How do you think Mark is feeling about giving Ingrid the video? You can just pop that in the chat, or you could just come off of mute if you want to. Ah, I see it. Hesitant. Good, good. For this question, just to let you know, there's no right or wrong answer really, but it is, the obvious answer is hesitant. He was agreeable. He was kind of laid back too, but yes, he's definitely hesitant. He was agreeable in the end. Let's explore why. Now, when I click next, this is just going to give me an error message because I only grabbed those first 3 slides. So what I'm going to do next is pop back into my presentation and let's talk about how I got to that point of creating the story. So let me just grab and make sure that I have the screen correct. Yep, there we go. Okay. So now that you've seen the story, what went into it? Okay, so first, with the stakeholders or subject matter experts, I needed to identify the root problem. This involves a lot of questions and conversations, and as I mentioned before, this turns into our training target to keep in mind. So in my case, the problem that they needed to solve was the possibility that project managers were not being careful with the data collected on their project. Then we identified what has been happening and what is supposed to happen. So these turn into actions. So you can see they're a little bit backwards. The conflicting actions are usually what you end up looking at first, but you also need to figure out what the correct actions are. You just need the opposites. Once you have those all recorded, what the actions are, and you might have to break them down into sub-actions and so on, then you also record any motivations around why one or the other is happening. And we'll come back to motivation in just a second. So something to note, this action list that we come up with is the key to everything in the story. This is what drives the story. So for my story, Mark was asked for project data or video, so it could be shared on a website and in a meeting with City Hall. The privacy was not considered though, the privacy of the data. So this was the conflicting action. Now, once I had my actions, I created learner personas. And I'm sure you've all remembered those learner persona exercises in your classes. These learner personas were based on the conversations with the SMEs about the audience for the training. And the cool thing is that these personas turn into my relatable characters. So I was able to build the motivation for their actions once I got to know them. So Ingrid, under pressure from the client, she wanted to answer the client's request quickly. So she didn't take the time to check if there was a client data agreement in place or any of the privacy policies. She just wanted that video because the client was asking. She didn't think it was important because they were asking. So what do you think Mark's motivation was? Any ideas? Ah, there we go. To fill Ingrid's request. You know, he wanted to do the right thing too. You know, he knows that the client is asking for this. He wanted to get the job done. So can you see how there's a little bit of a conflict? Of course, we want to please the client, and Mark might have been a junior employee too, so he may not have felt comfortable speaking up. Again, this is why it's so important to get to know your learners and create these personas. You know, even though he wanted to speak up, he didn't, not in this part of the story anyway. So once these things were in place, I was ready to build the story, which had been kind of coming together in my head anyway, a little by little, as we worked through all these pieces. So I created a storyboard, wrote the narration, recorded it, identified the visuals I wanted to use. And just for example, the traffic videos are from the Rhode Island Department of Transportation public live streams of a bridge that crosses the river in Providence. Since creating this, a lot more of it is gone. And of course, I've made sure that you can identify any license plates. And I also want to point out that I use Beyond and Storyline 360 for my project, but the story doesn't have to be a video. You can tell stories with just dialogue. You can create a PowerPoint that is maybe a comic book style, or even live training in a classroom. You can use stories this way. There's many ways to incorporate stories into learning. Just another plug for Rance's book and program. So going back to this graphic quickly. Now, you've seen the story with Mark and Ingrid as my relatable characters, plus the conflict of possibly sharing private data. You can see how this brought all of us to a desire for resolution. We wanted to make it right when the video ended. So, well, at least I wanted to. How many of you wanted to fix the problem? Or did you notice that there was a problem? I saw a few hands go up. Why do you think it is that we wanted that problem to be fixed? Any ideas? Everybody's so quiet with their chat. Yeah, you felt invested in the outcome. Definitely. And just think about this. That video is not longer than 1.5 minutes. And how quickly you were invested in this situation. And it's at this point where we can start the instruction, because now you want to fix it. We want to solve the problem. So we do this with what are called solve and reflect questions relating to the conflicting actions in the video. And notice that I didn't say I'm going to tell you how to fix it, or I'm going to put a list of to-dos or do's and don'ts on the screen. I'm actually going to make you reflect as a learner and then solve it, and then provide feedback along the way. So are you ready? We're ready to go ahead and solve it. We're going to go back to Storyline and see what happens next. So give me a second to move this over. I bet you never would be so excited about learning about client data privacy, right? Okay, so let me scroll down just a little bit. I'm going to start back here where we were at this first reflect question, and I'm going to go up to this point right here. What I've done is built a few different questions, and these are building upon one another to kind of lead the learner in the right direction. So let's preview those. Okay, so we already realized that Mark was hesitant. And now we're asking why. Why do you think he was hesitant to send the video that Ingrid chose? So I can type my thoughts in here. Felt uncomfortable, yeah. Any other ideas? Why do you think Mark was hesitant? I can type it in. I know the answer though. Oh, okay. So there was private data. Yeah. So Mark was hesitant. And let's just say because for a few different reasons, because yeah, I see it, because he didn't want to get in trouble. I can't type when anybody's watching me on the screen. I'm sorry. And was worried about the private data. We'll just stop there. There we go. It's do you guys all have that problem when you're typing? You make all the mistakes as you're typing it? Okay, so I'm going to click continue. Now, notice there was really no right or wrong answer. I just wanted people to think about it. So Mark was hesitant because he didn't want to get in trouble, or he was worried about the data. And you can see that it's very similar to the feedback. You know, he was likely concerned about the privacy issues related to showing license plates on the video. He wondered if it was appropriate to share in a public setting. So let's move on to the next question. Why did Mark ask what the video was for? Okay, so we think he was going in the right direction. So why was he doing this? There's a couple of options here, and I want to show you how I built this. The right answer is he wanted to classify the data. He wanted to find out if the video could be used, but I want to show you what happens when I choose the wrong one. So now we're moving from a reflection type question to a right or wrong question, but there's no penalty because we're still teaching. So for this one, the format of the video is not significant. Mark's main concern was about whether the video could be shared. Okay, so I'm going to try again, and I'll just show you the information for this one. No, not quite. He wanted to make sure it was interesting. Well, you know, it needs to be interesting, but again, it's not the actual answer. So I'll just try again. We'll get the right answer right now. And it says correct, Mark needed understand. So you can see how the feedback that I'm giving the learner is helping to build the knowledge around what's going on. So if they weren't quite sure why he asked for the video, they're going to learn it here. So we'll go ahead and click next to the last one. Okay, so what could be the impact? So now this is where we're thinking a little bit ahead. What could be the impact of showing the video? Because this wasn't shown in the training or in the video itself. Any ideas? All of this could possibly be true. Number 3, I see number 3. Yep, and that is correct. The client could be sued for putting private license plate information on a website. Now, this idea is kind of far-fetched because it's not likely that people are going to go in and go, oh, hey, I see my license plate, you know, but anyway, it's just the concept of it all. So that's right. If private information, such as license plates in this example, is mishandled, the client could face legal action. Okay, now I'm going to stop right here and just go back to the storyline. I don't want to force you to watch the next little part that's narrated. It's kind of ugly right here because it's all layered with, got layers and everything on it. But this goes through the 6 privacy principles at my company and what we strive to follow. And so again, a little bit more learning, a little bit more information sharing. And then I'm going to show you the last part of this. And you will get a link to this project at the end, by the way, so you can go through this and do this yourself. So let's preview this one more time. Thank goodness Storyline is not acting like it usually does. It's actually loading up pretty quickly. Okay, so now we have some solve questions that are actually kind of important. So we brought him to this point where he knows what he thinks he knows what he needs to do, and we're going to actually help walk through what he does need to do. So what resource should be the first place Mark should go to determine how to handle the video? So in the slide before, we talk about the client data agreement. I know I didn't give you that information, but we set up client data agreements whenever we work with a client to for this particular reason, and that's data privacy. So the right answer is client data agreement, but I could also, like the IT service desk, the IT service desk is definitely not going to help you here. The privacy officer, notice I'm just kind of clicking, you can click around if you want. The privacy officer could help, but the first place that he should go, you can notice I say first here, is the actual client, the client data agreement, which is correct. So it gives me a little kind of ta-da, there's my badge if you want to call it that. And then I have one more activity, and this one just is a little more thinking around what he should be doing, basically the actions that he should take. So this is a drag and drop activity, and as if you don't know, drag and drop activities are typically not accessible for keyboard users. So what I do is I give them an out and a way to skip to the summary slide. So I'm going to close this so you can see the activity. It's a very simple, not very exciting looking drag and drop. But the question is, what could Mark have done differently to ensure privacy when using surveillance video for meetings or websites? Think about the actions on the screen and are they best practice or not? So let's just go through these really quickly, and I'll drag them through really quickly so you can see them. But he could have, best practice, challenged Ingrid on her choice of video based on the privacy standards. So I let this sit here a second so they can look at it. He could have blurred the license plates. I mean, it may or may not be ineffective depending on the video, but we'll put that here. So it could be. Reduce the video quality. Probably not as effective because then you lose the video. He could have contacted the local privacy officer. Yes, even though we said before the first line of defense is the client data agreement. And then he could add a disclaimer. Well, that's definitely not best practice because you can't control what people are going to say and do and forward and all that kind of stuff. So here's
Great
the
work.
summary.
Let's review what Mark knows about Ingrid's request. The client wants a short video for a presentation at City Hall and project update on their website. The client data agreement states that project data of all kinds can be used, provided that personal information is protected and it is not available to anyone outside of those involved with the project or key stakeholders. One of our privacy principles states that we take appropriate security measures to keep personal data safe and only give access to those who need it.
Let's finish it up. So we brought Mark now to the final question. What should he do? What is the correct action? So based on what Mark knows about the project and the request, what is the best course of action? So we've got 3 options here. The first option is you can't use it at all, neither on the city web council, not on the website or in the city council meeting. The second option is it can be used at the city council meeting, but not on the website. And then the third option is the video cannot be used in the city council meeting, but it can be put on the website. So think through it and tell me what you think. I see a vote for 1. I see another vote for 1. Ah, good question, Alex. What does the client agreement specify? 2. Okay. So we don't have I'm not giving you all of this information in this example, but on the slide before, it did mention that if you had stakeholders, you could share information with stakeholders. So we're going to assume that the city council is a stakeholder in the project. And so the correct answer is actually 2. The video can be used at the city council meeting, but it can't be put out publicly on the website. So had you taken the full module, you'd have all of that information. You don't have access to a client data agreement, unfortunately, Alex, but this is the correct answer. And the way that this also works is that it's still going to help them along the way, even if you get the wrong answer. And then at that point, we go to the summary slide, which is highly layered and very boring. We're gonna go back now to the presentation. Let me just go back here real quick. Okay, almost done. So as I was working on this certification, this is not something that had never been seen at my company. Most of the time it was read and click or listen and click, just sharing information, not really teaching any capabilities or teaching people actions that they should take. So when I was working on this, I was fortunate that I could use something from work, an idea from work, because it was really applicable to what I do every day. And I was hoping to introduce this idea because I was so excited about it and possibly use it going forward. When I finished my project, I shared it with a few people and got some amazing feedback. So I wanted to just share 2 comments so that you can see, that people recognized that this was different. So here's the first one, and this is from Jess. She is my line manager. She's located in Australia. And she said, I enjoyed how the story-driven approach brought training to life. It made the content feel much more relatable and engaging, especially on a topic like privacy, which can often be dry. Okay, she said often, I would say always dry. The transition between the story and the solve and reflect questions was seamless, and I found that this method encouraged me to think critically about the concepts. And then the other feedback that I got was from Michael, and he's the Learning Technologies Director. He's located in the UK. He said, this is fantastic. I love the way you structured it and how the flow is logical and immersive. The beyond and story flow is great and works well in understanding the moment and keeps you thinking rather than answering. The story piece really pulls the content information out of read and click into personal resonance and experience. There's also a level of emotional vesting, which is a great achievement. And that right there was probably the best comment I could have heard, because that's what I tried to do, was that emotional vesting. And then he said, well done, love this. So believe me, I have these in my kudos folder. I keep those because, when you're working, you don't always get kudos every day. So it's nice to have those. So this brings us to the end of my presentation before I take questions. Before I share any thoughts, I want to make sure that I give you the links to my project as well as information about instructional story design. And so Kristen, if you don't mind popping that into the chat for everybody. The link to the project is the review version that's on Articulate Review. Feel free to go in and take it, check it out, all of that. And then the other link is to instructional story design, school story design. And I actually ran all of this presentation past rants, and he was like, I wouldn't change a thing, which was really a nice thing for him to say. And he actually did say that he had a conflict because I did invite him tonight. I think it would have been really cool for you guys to ask him questions as well, but he wasn't able to come. So I just want to say that I really appreciate this opportunity tonight to share this project, and I hope that you were all able to take something away that you can apply in what you do. Adding a story is so effective in the way that it brings content to life instead of reading bullet points on a screen. Bullet points will kill you. Remember, they're called bullet points for a reason. And sometimes it takes a little convincing, but once stakeholders see the value, and sometimes you have to create an example like I did here, once they see the value and the impact of a story and that it's not just once upon a time, they come to understand one of my mantras, and I have little post-it notes of the things that I want to remember. This one is, why would we create and deliver courses that we would never want to take ourselves? And so I try to remember that. You know, I don't want to experience bad training, so I'm not going to create bad training. So it's something to think about. And this is what I also tell when I'm mentoring other people. I also tell them, you know, push back nicely on the stakeholders, because a lot of times they're handing you a PowerPoint file saying, okay, just put this in so they can click and read through it, right? Well, that's not learning. If you have the ability plus the budget, and there's all sorts of things to take into account, add something that's going to actually bring value and be more effective. So to close, I just want to share this quote from Rance. He posted this a few weeks ago on his LinkedIn page. He said, without an action list, there's no training and there's no story. The action list drives strong conflict and brings the story to life. A clear, logical, and observable action list gives learners something real to follow and apply. Get the action list right, and the story flows naturally, creating an engaging and impactful learning experience. And then he summarizes it by saying, strong actions equals strong stories equals unforgettable learning. So with that, oh, I did pretty good. What questions do you have? And if you want, I can stop sharing my screen unless you want to see something specific. Maybe I'll keep it up for just a little bit.
I guess my question is, and great job, by the way, Marnie. This is
Hey,
Jake.
oh my gosh,
Hey.
hi.
My question to you is, was there kind of a length or a sweet spot that they recommended for when you're sharing a story, like how involved to get in it for that setup?
You know, we all have short attention spans, as we know. I think it depends on the story. So my goal was to keep it under like 2 minutes, and I think I ended up being a little over about a minute and a half. You can tell really, really effective stories in a short amount of time. But if there's more information that needs to be told, you know, definitely make it a little bit longer. And again, this was with a video, but you could do it in so many different ways, and you can tell pieces of the story at a time and break it up as well. I told the whole story all at once, but you can definitely break it up. So that is not a definitive answer to your question, but you know, it all depends on what the story is that you're trying to tell.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you see the chat, Marnie? So Alex is
Oh,
asking,
yeah.
no, I can read it for you.
Yeah, thanks.
He said, first of all, he said your presentation was amazing, and he said he does mostly live instruction. How do you think you could incorporate this concept into the classroom? And he said, I love the emotional buy-in it generates, and I want to mirror that.
Okay, so if I were doing this in a classroom, I would still use the video if I had it available to me. But you could actually sit there and you could just tell a story verbally. So you could say, here's Mark, and you could actually, if you had Mark and Ingrid, you could do voices if you wanted to. You don't have to. And there's actually some, Rance has some videos out about specifically doing that. You can probably find them on YouTube. But if you tell the story, if the story is written in a way that you have those actions and you have the conflict and all of that, you could just tell the story, and you could actually start it out with once upon a time. You're going to get their attention first, and then you could just start telling the story, and then stop and pause, and then ask the questions that you see in the module. And work through it that way. So people wouldn't be necessarily clicking through, but maybe you're showing the video on the screen and then you stop and you ask, so how do you think Mark felt? and just go around the room, and then the next thing, why do you think he felt that way? So it'd be a conversation after you told the story. So a lot of people think, well, it's all, I don't use this technology, or it's a lot of work for this technology, or like Alex, it's a really good point. You can definitely do it. You can definitely do it live. It's just a little bit different delivery method. Plus, it's a lot of fun. You're welcome. Anyone else?
I'm waiting to see if anyone will go. I'm going to jump in with one. So you're saying here that the action list comes from that difference between what's kind of supposed to happen and what is currently happening in the workplace. Are there types of questions that you would ask to try to get to that? Like, is there any framework for asking the questions to get to the point
There
of developing the
are,
story?
I don't know if I'd have to, gosh, it's been a while since I've been through the book, but here's what I would do. The first thing that whenever something comes to me and they say, well, we need training, because usually that's the thing. We need training. We need some, obviously, so there's a problem. So the first question that I ask is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? That's the very first thing that I ask, because is it something that could use a job aid, like an infographic, or just steps posted on the wall next to the register, that kind of a thing? Or is it really some behavior that needs to change? And so I always start with that question about, tell me what the problem is. And then then there's a little bit of digging where you're asking questions about, okay, so if they say that, oh gosh, I can't even think of an example other than what I have here on the screen, but if they say that, that our customer service is we're getting a ton of complaints about our customer service, for example, just off the top of my head. So, okay, so why do you think that is? So going through the whole questions, there's a terminology for something that we use in the sales training called the 5 whys, and it's asking these why questions over and over and over again till you get to the root problem. And so in the example of, our customer service is getting a lot of complaints, well, is it the system they're using that doesn't allow them to work effectively with the customers, or is it that they're not trained, or maybe there's low morale at the company and it needs to be fixed? So that's a big part of it. It's just, it's all about asking questions. And I'm really good at that once I'm in the conversation. Of course, I'm not giving you a good example right now. But I'm good at that because I just tell them right up front, I'm going to ask you a lot of dumb questions. You're going to think I'm just like, I'm just peppering you with questions. But I do that just so that I can understand where they're coming from and find out what the root problem is. Because they may think that that ABC is the root problem, when really it's actually DEF is the problem. And there might be, a management issue, or, you never know. You never know. So is there a set of prescribed questions? The biggest thing I can say is why. Asking why. What is the problem you want to solve? And why does it need to be solved? Again, getting back to that targeted, that training target. What's the root problem? What is the benefit or the outcome that we want to see? Comparing that to what's going on, and let's create training to solve that. Hopefully that answered your question.
No, that was great. I have one more. Ruth's gonna.
I didn't actually have a question. I just wanted to say hi. Hi to Marnie
Hi, it's so good to see you.
and say thank you. That was pretty amazing. I
You're
appreciate it.
welcome. I have
Kristen,
to say, I was just talking, I was actually talking to Amy today. We were like, how was it that it was 4 years ago that we graduated? And, I think Amy was a little bit after me, but I'm like, how did everything went so fast, so fast.
All right, my last question is going to be something students might be thinking about. It's slightly off topic. How did you learn storyline? So we don't teach storyline, explicitly in the program, but how did you go about learning it?
Let me just go over here. So honestly, I would say a lot is self-taught, but I watched a lot of tutorials. to get started with it. Now, my undergraduate degree is in computer science, and so understanding these triggers is no problem for me. The really cool thing about Storyline I found is that it's laid out a lot like PowerPoint. So if you understand how PowerPoint works, that's a good way to start. The other thing that you have to understand is timelines. Now, the timeline, let me just come down to this one so you can see this. The timeline is, this goes way back to, okay, I'm going to date myself. And if anybody programmed in Flash or anything like that, a timeline was the key to everything. So you can see I have my narration here. And just so that you know, when I record my narration, I don't record it in Storyline. I use Audacity, which is a free audio program. And that I record it there so I can edit out any, you know, coughs or hiccups or weird breaths or whatever. And then I import it into here. And then from here, I can take all of these pieces. So if you look at this, as I select one of these, you know, you can take it and this fades in right at the beginning. This fades in a little bit. Well, that's not right. They should both fade in at the same time. Now I'm looking at it going, wait a minute, they should come in at the same time. But you can see that I can bring things in as the narration is coming on, which is a signal. Remember signaling? I'm signaling through when I want them to see the stuff on the screen. And oh, thank you for answering that. Yeah, articulate story design or articulate storyline is what it is. So again, it looks a lot like PowerPoint. So if you start there, it's relatively easy to pick up. It's just there's so many tutorials and great information out there. You can just YouTube it. And then Articulate also has their support community. They have a community called eLearning Heroes, where you can find just about anything. And you're going to find a lot of things on there saying, hey, you guys need to fix this bug, but you're also going to find a lot of tutorials and training, and they hold regular training as well. But that's how I learned it. I didn't start learning it until probably I started learning it before I came to school, but it was probably about maybe five years ago or so.
Thank you.
It's a
That's
great
one of our,
program.
yeah, it's one of our biggest questions because we don't teach a specific program. We just kind of talk about in general the different interactive tools and let students choose. But it's something that comes up a lot. So,
And the bummer part about it is that it is expensive.
yeah.
So you can do a lot of the similar, because it's similar to PowerPoint, you can actually do a lot of similar things with PowerPoint and recording. It's just that you don't have these little triggers that can actually allow you to do certain things. Like, for example, here, I have triggers on here. I have a trigger. So anytime anybody, I didn't label these very well. This is really a bad design example, but you can see I'm looking at button number 1. So when somebody clicks on that, I show layer content 1 and it pops up down in here. So you can't do that with PowerPoint, but you can do the animation and have it come in with your, you can have it come in with your audio. So you can record audio right in PowerPoint and you can click as you're talking. One thing that, here, let me just show you something that I do. This might be a little bit helpful. I'm just going to go back so I can find a slide that has this on it and show you the example. Let me see, hold on. I'm going to pull this. Okay, now my thing is just not cooperating. Hold on. I'm going to pull, okay. Now you're being, come on, you can do it. Here we go. So this is presenter view for my PowerPoint that I'm showing right here. Something that I do, and you can see here's all my words. I didn't memorize it, but something that I do when I'm creating presentations is I use this little symbol to tell me when I should click. So as I'm reading along, all I'm doing is I'm just clicking along, and that's how the animation just shows up magically along the way. That's one trick that I don't know if anybody else does it that way, but you can see, and here's my instructions on how I'm gonna put the whole thing together. So if you don't have Storyline, you can use PowerPoint to do something very similar. It's a little bit more work because you don't have those triggers, but it is an option.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions for Marni?
I was going to say, I think I'm probably the oldest one on this call, but back in the day, before everything, we used to have slide tapes in school where there was a little beep telling the teacher when to advance the slide. So you've recreated the beep with
That's
the
exactly what it is. That's it. In fact, I was explaining it that way because I remember the what do they call them? Film strips or something
Mhm.
like that. And it was always the coolest thing. Okay, I'm dating myself too. In elementary school, we would watch the film strips and you'd hear the beep and then you turn the little thingy and the new picture comes up on the screen.
Right.
That's really what I'm doing. And so yeah, when I put these that's how I build my presentation. So it's it's definitely not memorized. I just make it look like it's makes me look good.
One more question from Alex. Do you find there's better learning retention using this storytelling method?
Yes, for a couple of reasons. So the first reason is when you're emotionally connected, and this is perfect to have this slide up here. When you're emotionally connected, you want that resolution and it's going to stick. So, if you think about when you're telling a story to a friend, when there's a little drama, you're going to remember that story. So that emotional connection is where that desire for resolution comes into play, and then you're ready for the instruction. So at this point, you all could come into my company. You would know if somebody was asking you for data or for a video, you would know exactly what to do because you're going to remember the story more than you're going to remember the slides that have the instruction on them. And so the instruction is there just to kind of build that foundational layer. It's the story where all the learning takes place. And I will tell you, this is not something that came like naturally just like that. It took a little bit for me to go through the certification. I mean, I got it, I understood it, but it takes a lot of work to really finally see it. It's like one of those things, all of a sudden the light bulb goes on, you're like, oh, I get it. And now, as I mentioned to many people, I see a story and everything. I'm like, oh, that would make a good story. I wonder how we could develop that. Oh, that would be really good, And it does take some time to develop, but it's really a cool way of doing things. And if you can find ways to do it, it makes it a lot more fun, especially with these dry topics. You're welcome.
All right. I think that's it. Thank you so much, Marnie. This was really wonderful. And we were talking a little bit beforehand that some students who'd already graduated have been asking me lately, students who graduated a couple years ago, like kind of what's the next step? What can I learn? What's another thing I can try or do? So this is a great example of something that you could dig into. And thank you for sharing the resources of the story. I forget the name of it, the story
Story design.
School of Story Design, because I think that's a great resource. So thanks so much for sharing everything you learned and your project. And thank you everybody for being here on a Monday night.
Yes, thank you.